for somebody who's listening to this or watching this, if they want to know like your 10 favorite exercises to look super jacked, what would they be?
Yeah, well, the best exercise is the one you'll do. Push pull legs. If you want to become super jacked, you want to do something uh, in the pushing for chest, shoulders, and tris. You want to do something in the pulling for back and buys. You want to do something for legs, both quads and hamstrings. You know, this has changed for me over the years as a power lifter, bodybuilder, old school, guy from the late 80s and 90s. It was always free weights, free weights, free weights, free weights. So I was a young man. I could recover from that. Since competing and as I've gotten older, I'm 56 now, I'm cautious with the amount of fatigue I accumulate. And I want the workout to be enjoyable and not just stressful. And I don't want to, as mentioned earlier, I don't want to walk around for 3 days after a workout with a brain fog and DOMS. I just don't want to be sore all the time. It's not terribly enjoyable, but I want to get a sufficient stimulus. And so I use lower fatigue movements now. If I want to squat, it'll usually be a box squat with some sort of safety bar, so I'm not loading my elbows and shoulders with trying to do a low bar with the lack of mobility that I have at this age. But alternatively, I like the leg press and the belt squat because it doesn't have any axial loading, which I think some axial loading is important for maintaining your spinal integrity, your bone health. But the kinds of loads that I squat with would just end up fatiguing me, and I wouldn't recover from them nearly as well as I used to. So leg presses, belt squats are great. A seated hamstring curl where I can get full stretch without the stack bottoming out is one of my favorites for hamstrings, and then some sort of hip hinge for the hamstrings as well. And then on chest, my shoulder doesn't like a lot of heavy bench pressing anymore, and so I've got to be cautious. Sometimes instead I'll use a slight incline press on with dumbbells because I have independent rotation. I can bring my elbow in real close to my to my rib cage, which has less stress on my shoulder. I can do it. It's just that I feel it for a couple of days afterwards, and I just don't. I'm just not interested in having that kind of soreness. I'll prefer, say, a lat pull down and a chest supported row over a T-bar row or a bent row because they're lower fatigue, less shear stress on the lumbar, and just less load overall. And that's fine. You don't necessarily doesn't necessarily matter how heavy the weight is. If you can isolate the muscle, you can you can get the same hypertrophy result from it. So that. Those are my big things now. Is just to make sure I do push pull legs every week. Like I said, I do upper body day off, lower body. And in terms of time commitment, that's one of the biggest problems I have with when I'm busy or when my clients are busy. We saw some research recently come out where supersetting antagonistic body parts is just as effective doing a single body part. The rest periods are important. We see that 3 minute, 2 and 3 minute rests are better than 1 minute rest for hypertrophy. That 1 minute, particularly when you're training hard, just doesn't seem to be sufficient to restore all the substrates necessary to have a subsequent set that's of equivalent intensity. The substrates could be creatine phosphate. The substrates could just be stress. Could be central nervous system stress. You haven't completely recovered from the previous set in order to invest enough energy into the next set to sufficiently challenge the muscles with enough mechanical tension. It could be hydrogen ion clearance, what we used to refer to as lactic acid. That could be that it just takes you longer to clear the hydrogen ions, and you need that extra time in order to do a subsequent set and not be hindered by that limitation, because the primary driver of hypertrophy is mechanical tension. It's not the pump. It's not muscle damage. Any of those other things that we used to presume were of benefit, which we only presume three: muscular tension, mechanical damage, and the pump, metabolic stress. I'm focused on trying to get a sufficient workout in a limited amount of time, and so I'll use the supersets with antagonistic body parts. So I'll do a chest exercise, rest a minute, do a back exercise, rest 2 minutes, do a chest exercise, rest a minute, do a back exercise, rest 2 minutes. That'll get me through my workout in about, I don't know, 60-70% of the time that it takes to do either of those body parts separately. And I still get the same stimulus. And that's what the evidence is showing now in the research.
I know a lot of your training now and some of your favorite exercises that you just mentioned to help keep you strong, jacked, whatever you call it. It's focused also on like injury prevention and also time. For people who aren't experiencing injuries, they're a little bit younger, they have more, I guess, age on their side, if you will. What are some of the fundamental exercises you think they should be incorporating into their routine? I know adherence is what matters most, but let's just say they've got that down. They're consistent, they're disciplined, they're just looking for some of the best exercises to make sure that's in their program. Like, what would they be?
Well, if strength is specific, so if they're competing in a strength sport, then they want to use that particular exercise, be it a squat, a bench, or a deadlift, or in strongman, the implements that they're training. So strength is specific. You'll get equally strong on a squat or a bench or a leg press. But if the test of strength is the squat, then that's where you want to put the most of you want to invest a significant amount of your effort. But if it's building strength to carry over into sport, speed in particular, then it doesn't matter whether it's a squat or a leg press or a hack squat. It doesn't matter. Okay, it's just force production is all it is. You know, part of it's force production, part of it's nervous system. You know how quickly that you can fire, and you train that differently. You train that with short ground contact time and sprinting and that kind of thing. So I don't have a preferred exercise, but to say that the more complicated, there's guys out there who this will frustrate, but the more complicated an exercise becomes, the more difficult it is for you to isolate the muscles that you're trying to train closer to failure, because your coordination and balance will start to dictate your ability to do another rep. And I would say, for instance, that's things like Olympic lifts or even a squat. At some point, you're getting closer and closer to failure, you're getting fatigued, and the squat position starts to change. Maybe you throw your ass into the movement more, or you have a forward lean, or things like that, or you just can't get any closer to failure because you're under the bar. That's a constraint. Nobody wants to go to failure on a squat because it's on top of you. Whereas on a hack squat or a leg press, there's usually some spotter guards on the bottom of a hack squat. You can bottom out if you can't get the rep. And also, having said that, failure isn't required, and might actually be counterproductive. It was hard for me to overcome this evidence, as someone who trained every set to failure for 20 years. Go to the gym every week and max out. Somebody had to drag the bar off of you. And nowadays, we found that that's an unnecessary level of fatigue, and muscle damage that isn't a primary driver of results. And so you can leave a rep or two in the tank. And for strength, you can leave 3 reps in the tank. It seems that once that bar speed starts to slow down, you're just training yourself to be slower. And so you can be a little more generous in terms of strength. Usually you can get 5 reps at an 85% load. If you do sets of 3, you're fine. You don't have to grind, and particularly in terms of strength. Speed's important, and we don't want to trade ourselves to be slower. For hypertrophy, you can get closer to failure, and probably will need to over time as you become more experienced. Another challenge is as you get stronger and the weight gets heavier, you're going to experience more fatigue especially on the multi-joint movements. Might be a good time to start throwing in some single leg work or some isolation work, leg extension, or Romanian split squats, those kinds of things, in order to have less systemic fatigue, but still get an equivalent hypertrophy result from the movement itself.
We've spent most of this conversation focusing on a lot of the information. And this information, frankly, is nothing new, right? I mean, I think a lot of this information has been repeated and repeated and repeated. And I love still having these conversations because I want to hit home these points over and over again because there's so much confusion out there. And I think it's kind of simple as far as what it actually takes to build muscle, to lose body fat, to get lean, or even to get a six pack if you want a six pack, right? You also mentioned at the beginning that adherence is the biggest problem with all of this. What are some of your top tips for people to be able to stick to this thing long term? Because they can listen to this, they can watch this, they can read all the research they want, but if they can't stick to what we're talking about, none of this matters.
Compliance is the science. And you're right. There are a bunch of strategies that I try and implement to get people to adhere. And there's been lots of studies on this. One of the main things in terms of diet, I said the best diet is the one you'll follow, but also the one that you can adhere to has to be, it has to be preferable to you. It has to meet your satisfaction in terms of taste, or at least have some appeal, and that you're not just eating cardboard, egg whites and broccoli. But it has to be convenient and sustainable, and the time, it has to be such that you can do it in a reasonable amount of time. So meal prep is a big one, and I'm not just shilling because I own the Vertical Diet Meal Prep Company. I actually started a meal prep company for my own benefit, because I got tired of cooking my food all the time, and so I partnered with a large national meal prep provider and had them make my menu and label it for me and distribute it to me and to all of my clients, and then to the general public. And I've been doing that about 7 years now, or 6 years now. Uh, Whether it's my company or any other company, I don't care. Meal prepping is a huge way, and we've seen bodybuilder, figure, physique, bikini people doing this for decades. That's one of the reasons they're so successful. They carry around their little Tupperwares. And, they've got their prepped meals in the refrigerators. They know exactly that everything is pre-portioned. They know exactly what they're going to eat, when they're going to eat, and it's all planned out. And every Sunday's meal prep day or what have you. I like my meals fresh, and so I make them daily in the morning, or I use my meal prep. I heat up. By fresh, I mean hot. I've eaten enough cold food out of Tupperware over the years. So yeah, meal prep, and then second to that, you've heard me encourage people to get these little 24-ounce thermos, the double insulated thermos that you can carry around with a hot meal inside. It'll keep the meal hot for 8 to 12 hours, kind of depending on how hot it is when you put it in. And I travel with those too. I'll make my meals and get on a plane and have meals to get me through the day, and pack some meal prep into my bag, just wrap it in a towel and throw it on my checked luggage. And when I travel, I end up in some place with a microwave and a refrigerator, and I can have my meals are all there for me for the whole weekend. And I'll use my thermos over again the next day if I'm doing seminars on Saturday or Sunday. And when I travel out of the country for a week or so, I'll take a rolling Coleman cooler loaded with 30 meals. And so when I land, I've got all my meals with me. I particularly encourage athletes who compete internationally to do this, because I've seen it way too many times. I currently work with the U.S. Women's Olympic wrestling team, and one of their competitors went to an international meet and didn't take her food, and she ended up getting food poisoning while they're eating the local food and ended up in the hospital. And this happens quite often. The strongmen, when they travel internationally, say to Manila, or when they go to these World's Strongest Man competitions internationally, you'll often hear about them getting diarrhea and losing 10 pounds, and it, dramatically impacting their performance. And even if it's for pleasure or business, the same problem would put a huge dent in the enjoyment of that trip, or the effectiveness of that trip, if you end up in the hospital with Montezuma's revenge. Flex Wheeler experienced the same thing when he went to Brazil. I take my meals with me, and I don't eat at some random place on the side of the street internationally. It's not to say I haven't gone to many nice restaurants. I've been in 17 countries, but if it's for performance, so I tell you, pack your meals, take them with you, stay in an extended stay or an Airbnb, and you're good to go. So those are a couple of tips in terms of diet. Is to make sure or even using a food delivery service, to go do your grocery shopping for you. Anything that makes that process more convenient is huge. And then we talked about, in terms of exercise, how effective and efficient and how easy for compliance the 10-minute walks are. If you don't like doing 30 or 40 minutes of cardio a day, it sure is easy. Just get up in the morning and take a 10-minute walk, take one after lunch, and take one before bed. And there's your 30 minutes of cardio a day. Done. Anything else is what you enjoy doing, that you would do anyhow. But the training, as mentioned, that too, there's a lot. I love lifting. I've loved it since the day I started. Most people don't. And so if I'm assigning some sort of resistance program to a middle-aged woman, who hasn't historically done that, that's not particularly enjoyable for them. And oftentimes that requires me to go in with the client and walk them through the gym. And all I'm looking for is things that they enjoy doing. How'd you like that? And that now we're back to battle ropes and burpees not being something people look forward to doing. But you can take them through the gym and put them on certain machines and show them how to use them, and they become less daunting, and they might find things that they enjoy. One of my favorite tricks, if I can call it a trick, is to put a client on a trap bar deadlift. It's very easy, any beginner. It says a low barrier to entry. It's a high handle trap bar deadlift, and I just have them do, a couple sets of 5. Well, 3 days later, when they come in and I have them do it again, I can add 10 pounds to each side. They saw progress. They think they got stronger. And they sort of did, but we both know it's a neural adaptation. They're just learning the movement. They get more coordinated at it over time, and their body starts getting used to recruiting the muscles necessary to affect that exercise. But I use that to my advantage. And for the next 8 or 10 weeks, I get to add 10 pounds a week. And then they're bragging to all their friends. They're telling their husband, "Oh my God, I lifted this much today." And oh my God, I lifted this much. I got, and it's more every single time. That's the hook. The hook is it's measurable, it's immediate feedback that's rewarding. And they're going to go tell everybody, when I started, I could only deadlift the 10s, and now I'm doing the 40s on each side, and it's cake. That's progress. Whether it's manifested on the scale or in the mirror is irrelevant. The fact that it's measurable and it's rewarding and it's something they look forward to for the next workout. And you can keep that going for months. They'll probably continue to gain strength for months. So I usually focus on strength with beginner clients. And it doesn't just have to be a 5 rep max. It doesn't just have to be the deadlift. It can be any exercise. Just every time that pin, I always write it down. Every time that pin goes up 10 pounds, they're able to execute a movement and they're stronger than they were before. That's progress. And I have a good buddy that's been training. That's all he's done is training. He owns 2 personal training facilities. He's trained thousands and thousands of clients. He has a giant board on the wall. Was a chalkboard, now it's a whiteboard. And he has the name of all of his clients, not just the strongest person in the gym, as most people do. He has every single client. He breaks them up kind of by sex and age groups. They can see other clients in their sex and age group. And then he has a long list of exercises. He's got like 10 exercises that he lists there, whether it's a trap bar deadlift or it's a bench press or a lat pull down or whatever it is. And he measures their peak performance, whether it's a single rep max or a 5 rep max or a 10 rep max. He's got all these different measurements. And then when his clients come in, if it's upper body day, you say, pick one of these exercises and beat the book. Just outperform, do at least as much or maybe outperform. Let's beat a record today. Let's set a PR. And that's the basis of his entire program. It's just having people come in and set PRs on a variety of different, exercises that they have to choose from pertaining to that day's particular movement pattern, push, pull, legs. And he's been enormously successful. He has another board showing how long people have been with him. He has 5-year, 10-year, 15-year clients on this board of people that he's been training for up to 15 years. People who have had children, and then he attended their kids' graduation at high school. It's fascinating to see. It's been his whole life. His name's Matt Whittemer out of Beat Training in Cincinnati, and I was so impressed with him. And we've been friends, and we actually trained John Jones together down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's an extraordinary trainer. Matt is. He trained, and he was an NFL strength and conditioning coach up in Cincinnati, and also in Pittsburgh. And so he's got lots of experience, most certainly, but he's fantastic at what he does for these clients. So we wrote a book together called Building a Career in the Fitness Industry, which is basically an employment manual for all of the people that work for him. He's had dozens and dozens of trainers work under him over the years, describing this system of how to, it's not just how you make money, but it's how to secure and keep clients long term. And this is just one of the methods that he uses as far as keeping them interested and getting them to come back. And it's not battle ropes and burpees.